The smartest person in the room is usually the one nobody fully notices at first. Not because they lack presence, because they understand something dangerous. Visibility creates exposure. While everyone else rushes to prove intelligence, reveal opinions, display emotions, and dominate conversations, another type of person stays quieter, more controlled, more observant. They are studying reactions instead of performing for attention. That changes everything psychologically. Because the moment you stop needing people to understand you immediately, your behavior becomes harder to predict. And once prediction disappears, control becomes difficult. Most people expose themselves within minutes. Their insecurities appear through over-explaining. Their ego appears through constant correction. Their emotional weakness appears the second pressure enters the room. They don't notice any of it, but a strategic mind notices everything. The hesitation before someone answers, the emotional reaction hidden behind confidence, the need for validation disguised as personality. Human behavior starts looking mechanical once you understand what drives it underneath. That realization changes the way you move completely. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop speaking emotionally. You stop giving people clear access to your intentions. And that restraint creates something rare: uncertainty. People become uncomfortable around individuals they cannot emotionally map. They stop knowing what affects you, what controls you, or how far your awareness actually reaches. That discomfort slowly turns into caution. This video is about developing that level of intelligence. The kind that stays calm under pressure, notices weakness before it becomes visible, and understands people without revealing itself completely in return. Watch carefully, because once your mind becomes difficult to predict, people start treating you differently without even realizing why. First, the predictable mind. Why most people expose themselves instantly. Predictability rarely looks dangerous at first. Most people actually see it as normal behavior. They speak immediately when emotional, explain themselves too quickly, reveal future plans before results exist, and react impulsively whenever pressure appears. Everything becomes visible through timing, emotion, and uncontrolled expression. That exposure creates weakness automatically. A predictable person is easy to study because patterns become obvious very quickly. Their anger follows familiar triggers. Their insecurity appears through over-explaining. Their desperation appears through attention-seeking. Even confidence becomes measurable because emotional reactions eventually expose where stability ends. Very few individuals notice how much information human behavior leaks unconsciously. That is why strategic minds focus heavily on observation. Once patterns become visible, future behavior becomes easier to anticipate. Someone emotionally reactive today will likely remain emotionally reactive tomorrow. Someone controlled by validation today will likely remain controlled by validation later. Prediction creates influence. The moment people understand your emotional patterns, they begin adjusting behavior around them. Some manipulate those patterns directly. Others simply stop respecting you because certainty removes psychological tension. Human beings feel cautious around unpredictability and comfortable around repetitive emotional behavior. That difference changes social dynamics completely. A sharper mindset avoids unnecessary exposure instead. Thoughts remain private until timing matters. Reactions become delayed instead of automatic. Emotional pressure no longer forces immediate expression. This creates uncertainty because people cannot easily measure intentions, limits, or emotional weak points anymore. Now, interaction becomes psychologically different. Instead of reacting impulsively, you begin studying consequences before speaking or moving. Silence becomes useful. Patience becomes valuable. Emotional restraint starts protecting your position naturally. Most individuals never develop this awareness because emotional expression feels authentic to them. They mistake impulsive honesty for strength. while exposing every psychological entry point unconsciously. A disciplined mind works differently. It understands that whatever becomes predictable eventually becomes controllable. That realization changes behavior permanently, because self-awareness replaces emotional impulse gradually. You begin noticing how quickly ordinary people expose insecurity through speech, reactions, body language, and emotional urgency. While they continue revealing themselves automatically, your behavior becomes slower, quieter, and harder to calculate. That shift creates psychological distance immediately, because uncertainty forces caution. And once caution appears inside interaction, influence starts shifting toward the person who reveals the least, while understanding the most. Eventually, controlled behavior reveals deeper intelligence than emotional expressiveness ever could. The less predictable someone becomes internally, the harder they become psychologically to manipulate, pressure, influence, or understand through interaction. Second, the silent advantage. What happens when nobody can read you? Silence changes people faster than words do. Most individuals become uncomfortable when they cannot clearly understand someone's intentions, emotions, or next decision. Uncertainty creates psychological tension because the human mind naturally wants patterns it can measure safely. That is why quiet individuals often appear more intimidating than loud ones. People fear what they cannot calculate. Someone constantly explaining thoughts becomes easy to predict eventually. Their emotions remain visible. Their limits remain visible. Their insecurities become easier to locate, because emotional exposure keeps providing information continuously. A quieter person removes that access completely. Now, interaction becomes uneven psychologically. The other side keeps searching for certainty while receiving almost nothing useful emotionally. Small pauses begin creating pressure. Reduced reactions begin creating caution. Controlled expression starts forcing other people into overthinking naturally. That shift creates hidden advantage. Most individuals accidentally expose themselves whenever silence appears inside conversation. They begin over-explaining, filling pauses, revealing emotions, defending positions, or seeking reassurance unconsciously. Discomfort pushes them into unnecessary expression automatically. Meanwhile, the observer keeps learning. This changes social positioning completely, because information starts moving mostly one direction. The quieter individual understands more, while revealing less personally. That imbalance increases influence without needing dominance, aggression, or emotional performance externally. Another transformation happens internally too. You stop feeling pressured to react instantly. That matters, because emotional urgency destroys awareness. Once reaction slows down, observation becomes stronger. Details appear more clearly. Contradictions become easier to detect. Manipulation becomes easier to recognize before emotional involvement clouds judgment later. Now, calmness starts replacing impulsiveness naturally. Most people misunderstand silence entirely. They think quietness signals weakness, insecurity, or social discomfort. In reality, controlled silence often signals discipline. Someone capable of remaining emotionally composed without forcing attention usually understands psychological positioning better than emotionally expressive individuals around them. Over time, this behavior changes presence itself. People begin speaking more carefully around you because they cannot fully measure your thoughts anymore. Uncertainty creates caution naturally, and caution changes power dynamics quickly, because emotionally unpredictable individuals remain difficult to manipulate through ordinary emotional pressure, attention games, provocation, or impulsive social interaction patterns repeatedly used against emotionally reactive personalities everywhere daily. That is the silent advantage most individuals never develop consciously. They continue speaking emotionally while exposing insecurity, intentions, weaknesses, and reactions automatically. A controlled observer operates differently. They understand that the person revealing less emotionally usually controls the interaction psychologically. because hidden information always creates uncertainty. And uncertainty naturally creates influence over emotionally expressive personalities. Influence grows stronger whenever emotional discipline remains consistent during pressure. Leave a like on the video and comment unreadable if people no longer fully understand how you think. Third, the emotional weapon. How calmness creates psychological control. Calmness becomes dangerous when everyone else loses control emotionally. Most individuals never realize how much emotion weakens judgment during pressure. Anger creates impulsive decisions. Fear shortens perspective. Excitement destroys caution. Emotional instability changes behavior quickly because intense feeling overwhelms strategic thinking almost immediately. That is why calmness creates psychological advantage. A composed person continues observing, while emotional individuals collapse into reaction. They notice details others miss completely. Timing becomes clearer. Weakness becomes easier to detect. Emotional people expose themselves automatically because pressure removes behavioral discipline very quickly. This changes power dynamics immediately. Someone remaining emotionally controlled during chaos appears mentally stronger than everyone reacting impulsively around them. Human beings naturally associate calmness with certainty, stability, and hidden capability, because emotional composure signals internal control under pressure. That perception creates influence. Most manipulation depends heavily on emotional reaction. Provocation works only when emotion controls behavior. Guilt works only when emotion controls decisions. Fear works only when emotion overrides logic completely. Calmness interrupts that process. Once emotional reaction stops controlling movement automatically, manipulation loses effectiveness quickly. Now pressure no longer creates immediate exposure. Instead of reacting emotionally, you begin analyzing why emotional pressure appeared initially. That awareness changes behavior permanently. You stop making decisions while angry. You stop speaking impulsively during frustration. You stop allowing temporary emotion to shape permanent consequences. Instead, emotional control starts protecting positioning naturally. Another transformation happens internally too. You begin understanding other people more clearly, because emotional distance improves observation. While emotional individuals remain trapped inside reaction, a calmer mind studies structure instead. Motives become visible. Emotional instability becomes predictable. Weakness begins exposing itself through behavior repeatedly. This creates hidden advantage socially. Most people react emotionally before thinking strategically. A disciplined mindset reverses that order completely. Thought comes first. Emotion comes second. That sequence changes outcomes, because emotional urgency no longer controls decision-making automatically. Over time, calmness stops being personality and becomes weaponized discipline instead. People struggle influencing someone emotionally stable because stability removes psychological entry points. Emotional pressure loses strength. Provocation loses effectiveness. Fear loses much of its control. And once emotional control disappears from other people's hands, your decisions finally become completely your own, without external manipulation affecting direction anymore, psychologically or emotionally, during difficult situations consistently. That level of control intimidates emotionally reactive personalities. They expect visible frustration, emotional defensiveness, impulsive anger, or emotional collapse under pressure. When none appears, uncertainty increases instead. Uncertainty creates hesitation because people cannot predict someone remaining emotionally balanced during manipulation, conflict, tension, stress, or intentional psychological provocation. Fourth, the strategic illusion. Why smart people never reveal full intentions. The moment people fully understand your intentions, they begin preparing against you. That is why intelligent individuals rarely reveal complete direction early. Not because deception feels exciting, but because visibility creates vulnerability. Once others clearly measure your goals, emotional state, expectations, and next decisions, your behavior becomes easier to influence strategically. Most individuals expose themselves accidentally. Excitement makes them overshare plans before results exist. Ego makes them seek recognition too early. Emotional trust makes them reveal personal direction before understanding who deserves access to it. Every unnecessary disclosure creates information others can study later. A more strategic mind avoids this weakness carefully. It understands that hidden intention creates flexibility. When people cannot fully calculate your next move, certainty disappears. Without certainty, manipulation becomes harder, because prediction weakens significantly. That uncertainty changes interaction immediately. Others begin making assumptions instead. They overanalyze behavior, search for meaning inside small actions, and project their own expectations onto limited information. Meanwhile, your real intentions remain protected internally until timing becomes useful. This creates psychological advantage naturally. Most people believe transparency always creates trust. In reality, excessive openness often creates exposure before position becomes stable enough to protect itself. Smart individuals understand that controlled ambiguity protects movement better than emotional honesty during early stages of conflict, negotiation, ambition, or social positioning. Another shift happens internally too. You stop feeling emotionally pressured to explain yourself constantly. That matters because over-explaining usually signals insecurity, validation seeking, or emotional dependence on being understood immediately. A disciplined mind becomes comfortable allowing misunderstanding temporarily, instead of exposing everything for reassurance. This creates emotional independence. Now actions become more important than announcements. Quiet preparation replaces emotional performance. Observation becomes stronger than attention-seeking. You stop needing everyone emotionally aligned with your plans before moving forward strategically. That restraint changes social perception quickly. People become cautious around individuals difficult to fully read, because uncertainty creates psychological tension naturally. They cannot confidently predict reactions, limits, motivations, or future behavior anymore. That missing certainty weakens influence significantly. Over time, strategic concealment becomes instinctive instead of forced. You begin recognizing how often emotional people reveal themselves unnecessarily, through talking, reacting, and seeking validation publicly. Meanwhile, your behavior becomes more measured, controlled, and difficult to interpret externally. That difference creates hidden advantage, because people rarely defend themselves effectively against intentions they cannot fully understand beforehand. Eventually, emotional unpredictability combined with disciplined restraint creates powerful positioning psychologically. Others remain focused on appearances while your actual direction continues developing privately without interference. Emotional pressure, unnecessary resistance, or premature exposure weakening momentum before results fully arrive publicly later. Fifth, the weakness detection. How to notice vulnerability before others do. Weakness almost never appears directly. People hide it instinctively. Confidence hides insecurity. Perfectionism hides fear. Constant humor hides discomfort. Aggression hides emotional instability. Most individuals only react to surface personality because emotional thinking keeps attention trapped at presentation level. They hear confidence and assume strength. They see loud behavior and assume certainty. They mistake appearance for structure repeatedly. A perceptive observer studies something deeper instead. Patterns. Human behavior always leaks internal weakness eventually, because insecurity influences decision-making unconsciously. Someone obsessed with validation reveals emotional dependence. Someone reacting intensely to criticism reveals fragile self-worth. Someone forcing dominance constantly reveals fear of losing control internally. The patterns become obvious once observation sharpens. That awareness changes social understanding completely. You stop judging people by image alone. Instead, attention shifts toward what behavior is compensating for psychologically underneath. Every repeated emotional pattern begins exposing hidden pressure points naturally over time. This creates advantage immediately. Once you understand what emotionally controls someone internally, their reactions become easier to predict externally. Their fears become visible through defensiveness. Their insecurities become visible through overcompensation. Their emotional needs become visible through repeated attention seeking unconsciously. Most people never recognize this because they focus too heavily on words instead of behavior. Behavior reveals truth faster. You begin noticing your own weaknesses more honestly. That self-awareness matters because hidden insecurity controls behavior strongest when ignored completely. The moment weakness becomes visible consciously, emotional reactions lose some automatic influence over judgment and decision-making naturally. Now emotional discipline becomes possible. Instead of covering weakness through image, attention shifts toward correcting internal instability directly. This creates genuine confidence rather than emotional performance designed for validation externally. Over time, weakness detection becomes instinctive. Tiny reactions begin exposing pressure points automatically. Forced confidence sounds unnatural. Emotional overreactions reveal insecurity immediately. Excessive attention seeking becomes easier to recognize because emotional patterns repeat predictably across different personalities constantly. That awareness changes relationships too. You stop becoming intimidated by appearance alone. You stop trusting emotional performance automatically. You stop assuming confidence equals stability internally. Instead, behavior becomes psychological evidence. This creates calmness during interaction because illusion loses much of its influence. Loud personalities stop feeling powerful automatically once hidden insecurity becomes visible underneath their behavior consistently. Eventually, understanding vulnerability changes social perception permanently. You begin recognizing that nearly everyone protects some internal weakness emotionally, even highly confident individuals externally. That realization removes much of the intimidation surrounding social dynamics because human behavior starts looking predictable structurally, instead of emotionally overwhelming psychologically during pressure or interaction. Comment silent operator and subscribe if you've learned that revealing less creates more control. Sixth, the controlled pressure. Make people destroy their own position. Most people ruin themselves emotionally when pressure increases. That is why controlled pressure becomes dangerous psychologically. A reactive person attacks directly, argues emotionally, forces confrontation, and exposes intention immediately. A strategic person operates differently. Instead of creating chaos openly, they allow emotional pressure to expose weakness naturally over time. That difference changes outcomes completely. Human beings become careless under emotional tension. Impatience increases. Ego takes control. Emotional instability weakens judgment. Eventually, people begin damaging their own position without realizing it consciously. A disciplined observer understands this clearly. They do not interrupt emotional collapse unnecessarily. They allow impulsive individuals to continue revealing insecurity, desperation, arrogance, inconsistency, or emotional instability naturally through behavior. Given enough pressure, most people eventually expose exactly what they were trying hardest to hide initially. That is where controlled pressure becomes effective. Not loud, not aggressive, calculated. Silence creates pressure. Uncertainty creates pressure. Delayed reaction creates pressure. Emotional unpredictability creates pressure. Most individuals cannot tolerate psychological discomfort for long periods. Eventually, they start reacting emotionally just to release internal tension. That reaction creates exposure automatically, because emotional urgency weakens discipline quickly. This changes interaction dynamics immediately. Instead of fighting emotionally, you begin controlling pace psychologically. Emotional individuals rush. Controlled individuals slow situations down intentionally. That timing difference creates imbalance because emotionally reactive personalities begin self-destructing under pressure, while disciplined minds remain stable. You stop needing immediate emotional victory. That matters because desperation destroys strategic thinking. The need to prove yourself quickly creates unnecessary reactions, emotional exposure, impulsive arguments, and positioning mistakes repeatedly. Controlled pressure removes this weakness. Now patience becomes useful. Observation becomes stronger. Timing becomes weaponized psychologically. Most people misunderstand pressure completely. They think domination requires visible aggression. Real psychological pressure often works quietly instead. The less emotional someone appears while pressure increases, the more emotionally unstable reactive personalities become around them naturally. Over time, this behavior creates hidden influence. People begin exposing insecurity voluntarily because emotional discomfort pushes them into unnecessary action automatically. Meanwhile, you continue observing calmly while their emotional reactions damage credibility, positioning, and stability repeatedly, without direct confrontation becoming necessary externally. That difference creates psychological advantage because self-destruction always appears more convincing than external attack publicly. Emotional individuals rarely notice they are damaging themselves while trying desperately to regain certainty. Emotional control, social dominance, or psychological balance during tense interaction, repeatedly over extended periods naturally. Eventually, controlled pressure becomes more effective than direct aggression ever could psychologically. Seventh, the Machiavelli shift. Become impossible to manipulate or predict. Manipulation works best against emotionally predictable people. Someone controlled by validation can be influenced through approval. Someone controlled by fear can be influenced through pressure. Someone controlled by attention can be influenced through withdrawal. Most individuals never realize how emotionally exposed they actually are. Their reactions follow visible patterns. Their decisions change through emotional triggers repeatedly. Anyone paying attention carefully can eventually predict behavior with surprising accuracy. That predictability creates vulnerability. A Machiavellian mindset breaks this structure completely. Instead of reacting automatically, emotional awareness becomes constant. You begin studying what controls your behavior internally before other people can exploit it externally. That self-observation changes everything psychologically. Now, emotional triggers become visible earlier. Impulsive reactions slow down. External pressure loses influence gradually. This creates unpredictability naturally. Most manipulation depends on certainty. Manipulators need emotional patterns they can rely on consistently. The moment those patterns disappear, influence weakens because reactions stop following expected emotional sequences automatically. That changes interaction completely. You stop reacting exactly how people expect. You stop revealing emotional weakness instantly. You stop allowing validation, guilt, fear, or attention to control decisions unconsciously. Now, emotional discipline protects positioning automatically. You become comfortable disappointing people. That matters because manipulation often succeeds through emotional obligation. Fear of conflict, rejection, misunderstanding, or disapproval pushes people into decisions against their own interest repeatedly. A more disciplined mindset removes this weakness gradually. Now, approval loses importance. External pressure loses urgency. Emotional manipulation becomes easier to recognize immediately. This creates psychological freedom. Most individuals continue operating emotionally their entire lives. Reactions remain predictable. Attention remains controllable. Emotional weakness remains visible through behavior constantly. A strategic mind evolves beyond this pattern instead. Observation replaces impulsiveness. Patience replaces emotional urgency. Awareness replaces unconscious reaction. Over time, this shift changes social perception completely. People stop feeling certain about how you will respond emotionally, because emotional control disrupts expectation repeatedly. Uncertainty creates caution naturally, and caution changes power dynamics quickly inside interactions psychologically. That difference becomes powerful. Someone impossible to emotionally predict becomes difficult to manipulate, because manipulation depends heavily on expected reaction. The less emotionally readable someone becomes internally, the less influence external pressure maintains over behavior consistently. Eventually, psychological discipline creates complete separation from ordinary emotional thinking. Decisions stop revolving around validation, fear, attention, insecurity, or emotional pressure unconsciously. Instead, behavior becomes intentional, measured, and strategically controlled, regardless of surrounding emotional intensity externally. And once emotional predictability disappears completely, very few people remain capable of controlling your direction psychologically anymore. Very few people ever reach the point where they truly understand how much emotion controls human behavior. Most never question their reactions. They never question why certain words affect them, why attention changes their confidence, or why emotional pressure keeps influencing their decisions repeatedly. But once awareness sharpens, those patterns become impossible to ignore. You begin seeing manipulation earlier. You begin noticing insecurity faster. You begin understanding how easily predictable behavior exposes weakness psychologically. That changes the way you move through life. Not louder, smarter. You stop needing constant validation. You stop revealing everything emotionally. You stop reacting automatically just because someone expects a reaction from you. That restraint creates a completely different kind of presence. If this video changed the way you look at intelligence, leave a like so more people start recognizing these psychological patterns too. Comment silent operator if your mindset has started shifting beyond emotional thinking. Subscribe for deeper dark psychology, strategic awareness, and Machiavellian intelligence. And share this video with someone who still believes power comes from expression instead of control.